Thank you, women all. Good evening, and thank you for being here. And welcome to Henry B. Gonzalez Convention Center. My name is J.B. Salinas. I'm with AT&T. I'm the Executive Vice President of AT&T. I'm here in San Antonio, and I'm delighted to serve tonight as your Master of Ceremonies. How about a round of applause first for the Bexar County Sheriff Supremo Mariachis. Let's give them a hand. By the way, that mariachi was developed by Sheriff Salazar, so it's very dear Sheriff, they do a great job. Please rise for the pledge colors by the Bexar County Sheriff's Office, and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, will be recited tonight by our Bexar County Sheriff, the Honorable Javier Salazar. The singing of our national anthem will be done by Ms. Savannah V., a two-time Tejano Award nominee and American Idol contestant.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held through the twilight's last gloom, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the rampart we watched were so gallantly strewn. Was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the whole
Let's give the Bexar County Sheriff and the Sheriff's Department a hand for posting in the colors. And one more hand for Ms. Savannah V. What a voice. Thank you. Let me seated now. I'd like to welcome to the stage Rabbi Block from the Chabad Center for Jewish Life and Learning for some thoughts and reflection tonight. Rabbi? Thank you. I am honored to be here tonight with close to or over 50 members of the Gonzalez family, friends, supporters, leaders, and elected officials from throughout our community. We are gathered here this evening to pay tribute to a giant of a man, Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez. A larger-than-life hero and champion of civil rights and integrity in public service. Congressman Gonzalez dedicated his storied career to the betterment of our citizens' quality of life and to the furtherance of equal economic and social opportunity for the Mexican-American community and beyond. Congressman Gonzalez was a dear friend of the San Antonio Jewish community, and the Jewish community will forever be grateful for his pivotal role in securing federal funding for the Golden Manor, a Jewish home for the aged. He worked closely with his dear friend Bill Sinkin and other Jewish leaders on Hemisphere, the World's Fair, and other projects that have revolutionized our city and set the stage for where we are today as a thriving, dynamic, and growing metropolis. Today, the historic meets the contemporary as we unveil this beautiful mural celebrating the life of a legendary icon whose influence extends into the present and beyond. Almighty God, bestow your beneficent blessings upon all assembled here, with special recognition to Mr. Luis Esquereño, Mayor Ron Nirenberg, City Councilman Roberto Trevino, artist Analí Diego, and the people at La Prensa, Texas, and the West Side Development Corporation, whose dedication, commitment, and talent helped make this dream come true. May all who gaze at this imposing mural be inspired by what the Congressman himself once declared. What I care about is what you care about: decency, justice, and an abhorrence for what is wrong, and an intolerance for mediocrity.
Rabbi, thank you. Tonight, our community celebrates and remembers the life and the contributions of a man who left a mark not only in the city of San Antonio, but some of us who grew up watching him and working. Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez. Our celebration this evening centers on the unveiling of an image of Congressman Gonzalez that, until December 2017, graced the walls of Estella's Mexican restaurant on Martin Street in the city's west side in the form of a mural painted by artist Ron Rocha. Is Mr. Rocha here? Mr. Rocha, please stand. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rocha. That image, unfortunately, did not survive the closing of the restaurant. However, thanks to technology like AT&T's and the artistry of a gifted and talented young artist by the name of Analí Diego, the image is restored to its former glory, and thanks to the city of San Antonio District 1 Councilman Roberto Trevino, and the city, led by Ron Nirenberg, it will now be displayed here in front of the Stars of Texas Ballroom. Thank you, Councilman Trevino, for your leadership and your role in making this evening possible. Please welcome to the stage my councilman, my personal councilman, Councilman Roberto G. Trevino.
Thank you, JD. Good evening and welcome. Thank you for being here to celebrate the legendary Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez, as well as an addition to the city's rich tapestry of public art. I would also like to recognize all the Gonzalez family that's here tonight. Thank you for being here. First, let's congratulate Analí Diego, who is the talented artist behind the creation that will grace the convention center for generations to come. And it is a true honor to have Ronald Rocha here to see his beautiful symbol of our city live on. Thank you, Mr. Rocha. Our local artists provide us with the flair, the panache that makes San Antonio, San Antonio. I hope to recognize Ronald and Analí at the next Distinction in the Arts Awards for providing art as immortal as long as there are artists to carry the torch. While the original felt at home inside Estella's, nestled between La Gente y Su Comida, its new home in the center city is fitting for a man who was the heartbeat of San Antonio for so many decades. Congressman Gonzalez was larger-than-life figure who never hesitated to do the right thing, even if it wasn't politically or financially expedient. The Herculean effort made by the artist, the Department of Arts and Culture, and the San Antonio Convention Center to relocate this mural are representative of the person who was always willing to put in the work. For those unfamiliar with this process, the first mural had to be digitized and then worked on with the city and the convention center to render it and find a new location. I'm making it sound a lot easier than it was. Trust me, it was a lot harder. It took some time y mucho esfuerzo, but the work is complete. Again, thank you for being here, and thank you to La Prensa, the West Side Development Corporation, the West San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, LULAC, and UETA, and all other sponsors for making this night possible. I also want to recognize Luis Carreño for taking an interest in preserving this mural. Without his advocacy, a great piece of art could have been lost forever. There's your champion right there. Between the mural unveiling, the panel discussion, and all the great folks here celebrating Congressman Gonzalez's legacy, I know we are in for a treat tonight. Thank you.
Councilman, thank you. Our next speaker really needs no introduction. Please welcome the mayor of the great city of San Antonio, our great mayor himself, Ron Nirenberg. Thank you, Mayor.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for such a wonderful moment that will be seared into our memory in the most wonderful way. Let's first acknowledge the Gonzalez family, who has given us so many great community servants and leaders throughout our city's history. Thank you very much, the Gonzalez family. Let's give them a round of applause. And of course, thank you to our dear Rabbi Block for the wonderful blessing. We are truly blessed to live in such a compassionate community that comes together and makes ideas like this come to life. Thank you to my colleague, Councilman Trevino, for your leadership representing District 1, which we are in, which includes the urban core of San Antonio now coming to life, downtown and Zona Cultural. Councilman Trevino has long advocated that we will build a city by design, that we're international and we're intentional about our investments so that we become a more inclusive city that honors our culture and our history. This project, this very special mural, that we thought was lost is here to stay. Thank God. And it's yet another example of that passion for a city by design, and I'm proud of all the partners who have worked together to turn a dream into art. That dream, of course, was due to the vision of Luis Escareño, a community champion civic leader. And all of the trends and trajectories of our personal histories mixed with that of the world. And it is quite something else to be walking through the steps of the temple in Jerusalem with Luis Escareño. I wish you could all do that one day with your lives. The original artwork by artist Ronald Rocha was at Estela's Mexican restaurant on the west side. We all remember where we were when we heard that it was going away. Not a day we want to remember. And for a while we thought this piece was lost in history. That is, of course, until Analí Diego, who teaches interior design and architecture at UTSA, brought it back to life with new technology and her very important talents. It's a remarkable accomplishment, and congratulations to the artist and to the entire team who made it happen, including the West Side Development Corporation and La Prensa. And if you haven't heard, La Prensa is also here to stay. Like so many San Antonio families, Henry B. Gonzalez was a child of the Mexican Revolution. His family settled here to escape violence and to start a new life with the hope of one day returning home. Does that sound familiar? Gonzalez graduated from Jefferson High School, San Antonio College, the University of Texas, and St. Mary's Law. It's okay if you can clap for your alumna institution. He was drafted into World War II and witnessed the discrimination many minorities faced after war, after serving our country. Despite losing his first campaign for city council, he ran again in what would become a remarkable record of public service over 5 decades that have impacted so many generations of Texans, Americans, and beyond. On city council, he fought to end racial segregation at swimming pools in the city, a legacy that we are learning even today on how we can continue to build on that foundation. He was fearless in his pursuit of justice. In the Texas Senate, he set a long-standing filibuster record opposing Jim Crow laws. He was relentless in the struggle for equality. In the United States Congress, he chaired the House Committee on Banking, Finance, and Urban Affairs. And despite not having a traditional financial background, he made it up with his intellect, with his moral capacity, and his clarity against housing discrimination. Does that sound familiar? He believed that if we were to be a great society, everyone needs an equal opportunity at the American dream. Henry B. Gonzalez was a patriot, was a statesman, was an honorable American we should all model ourselves after. He changed our city, he transformed the state of Texas, he worked to stitch together the moral fabric of an entire nation. And so without a doubt, we are all better off thanks to the service of Henry B. Gonzalez. But here we are, a life in art. And so now, thanks to this mural, generations of San Antonians will be inspired by his legacy and his pursuit of justice. And I have to say, it's a true honor to be in the presence of the Gonzalez family with Henry and with Charlie. Every time I see Charlie, I'm reminded of my very first day as an elected official in San Antonio in District 8 as a city council member. My first official visit, I don't know how it happened, was with Charlie Gonzalez. And I think it was with Via at the time. But I appreciate that visit, Charlie, because it is your family in these very complex, uncertain, and muddy times that has been a constant source of the moral clarity that this city, that this state, that this nation so desperately needs. And you continue to provide that guidance and that clarity on our most important days. A lot of you may not know, just like all of you, I have a cell phone in my pocket. But there was a card that Charlie gave me when he came in my first meeting on City Council in my office that I've kept with me, and I've had to laminate twice because it's fallen apart. But it was of his father, and when he gave it to me, I wish that I had met Henry B. Gonzalez in person. I never had the privilege of doing so. But this card has been almost the equivalent of a soul transformation in public service. And every now and then, especially at the local government level, when things get crazy and uncertain and complex, and when you're looking for a little bit of light to guide your way, I pull out the card. I didn't realize that it was printed in your program, but if you would do me the privilege of allowing me to read it with you. It says, "In my time, I have had the honor of being vilified for standing up against segregation. I have had the privilege of being a thorn in the side of unprincipled privilege, and the great joy of being demonized by entrenched special interests. What I care about is what you care about: decency, justice, and the abhorrence for what is wrong and an intolerance for mediocrity. I am an American without prefix, suffix, apology, or any other kind of modification. I never believed that the way to win equality is through separation." Amen, Henry Gonzalez. May this image, which happened to be a backdrop to an important event I had in 2017, may this image, may this light and clarity provided by your voice, your words, and your family forever guide the way for San Antonio. Thank you. Viva San Antonio. Viva Henry B.
Viva Nirenberg. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilman, for being here, both of you, for your leadership on the City Council. I know it's not easy, but we need a lot more common sense, not only here, but also in Washington, D.C. We miss Congressman Gonzalez's fine common sense, and you're right. I'm now honored to introduce a fellow National Hispanic Institute alumni, Anita Fernandez. She's the Chief of Staff for State Representative Diego Bernal, and for a special message from the Texas House of Representatives. I'm not sure how they let her out of the Capitol, but please welcome Anita Fernandez.
Thank you, JD. Let's keep it a secret that they let me out. No. Thank you, JD, and thank you to everyone involved this evening that made this possible. I'm very proud to be here with each of you on such a historic night. Representative Bernal wanted very much to help celebrate and memorialize this day as well, but due to the current 86th legislative session, he was unable to make it back from Austin. He has asked that I share a few words with you and present a state resolution on his behalf. Some of you in the audience today may have had the privilege of meeting and/or knowing the Honorable Henry B. Gonzalez. However, some of us, like myself, have only heard the stories, the legends of his work, his presence, and his long-lasting impact. State Representative Diego Bernal was one of the lucky ones who did have the opportunity to meet and know him. As a young boy, his mom instructed him one day that they were going to attend a man's birthday party. She gave no name and no other details. They arrived at Brackenridge Park, where he met, as he likes to tell the story, this guy wearing a guayabera who was having a very lengthy conversation with his mother. For most 6-year-olds, any conversation is lengthy. And he still did not know who this guy was. About a week after the party, at his house, the very first house he and his mom had ever rented, he received a piece of mail. He was summoned from his room by his mother. "Mijo, you got something in the mail. I want you to come out here and open it." As he entered the other room, the mailman asked if he could come inside and watch him open it. As a child, he thought, well, that's kind of weird. However, back in those days, we knew our mailman, they knew us. They delivered to the same routes over and over, and quite frankly, the mailman wanted to know why a young 6-year-old boy was receiving mail from the Congressman, Henry B. Gonzalez. He opened the envelope in front of his mother and the mailman to find a calendar signed by the Congressman. Young Diego knew, as much as a 6-year-old could, that this memento was special. And even more special was the man who took the time to send it to him. As he reflected on this experience throughout his life, more and more he realized the power of representation and advocacy that Congressman Gonzalez possessed. This memory and that calendar have stayed with him throughout his career as a public servant. Very similar to Mayor Nirenberg's story of your card in your wallet, to this day, we have 3 different pictures of Henry B. Gonzalez in our office, reminding the representative and us as a staff of the importance of commitment, conviction, pride, and community. This day is a day, thank you. This day is a day that will go down in history, immortalizing the life and work of a great man and human being. On behalf of State Representative Bernal, he extends his heartfelt thanks to you, Analí Diego. You are a city treasure who has truly captured the essence of who Henry B. Gonzalez is and the spirit of the original mural. Thank you. At this time, I would like to present a resolution commemorating today's mural unveiling. Whereas many proud residents of San Antonio are gathering on May 15th, 2019 for the unveiling of a mural of the late Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez at the Henry B. Gonzalez Convention Center. Whereas in 2018, a large-scale mural of Congressman Gonzalez was painted over by the new owner of a building previously occupied by Estela's Mexican restaurant. The establishment had long functioned as a de facto neighborhood center, and the mural provided a backdrop for many Democratic Party events and numerous community celebrations. The painting was also a beloved homage to the legendary Henry B., who served on the San Antonio City Council and in the State Senate before beginning his epic 37-year tenure in the U.S. House of Representatives. And whereas residents were dismayed by the loss of the mural, and Luis Ascareño, a neighbor of the former restaurant, began a campaign for the restoration of the image. He obtained permission from the original artist, Ron Rocha, and commissioned a reproduction by local artist, Analí Diego, who works as an architecture and interior design instructor at the University of Texas at San Antonio. Ms. Diego used vector illustration technology to create a digital depiction of the mural and printed the computer drawing on a canvas measuring 12 by 12 feet. In doing so, she has completed an impressive feat of historic preservation that will allow the artwork to be appreciated for years to come. Resolved that the unveiling of the Henry B. Gonzalez mural at the Henry B. Gonzalez Convention Center be commemorated, and that all those involved in this worthwhile endeavor be commended for their efforts. Congratulations and thank you for including our office in this momentous occasion, honoring the visionary and change maker that was and is Henry B. Gonzalez. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. The moment has come to unveil the art piece we are all here to enjoy. But before we do that, I'd like to invite the artist, Analí Diego, to the podium and ask her to address our audience. Please give a hand to Analí Diego.
Woo, that's going to be hard to follow. You guys did such a good job with your speeches. I'm truly overwhelmed by the positive response that I've received from this project. And I mean, first of all, this is not a project that only I worked on. This is really the work of, first of all, the artist, Ronald Rocha. So I celebrate him tonight. He was the original artist who created it. And I'm really thankful that you trusted me with this endeavor, because as an artist, I really understand how that must have felt. And also, Luis Escareño, thank you so much for reaching out to me. Actually, it's funny that we both met here in this particular room a year ago, thanks to Adriana Cisneros with Art Legacy. I don't know where she is right now, but I know she's here. So thank you for the introduction, and thanks to her and to you, I'm standing here today. This is such a meaningful project for me. I really thank the support of Councilman Trevino and our mayor and the Gonzalez family for also trusting me with this project. This means the world to me. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. As most of us know, San Antonio has been recently named the fastest growing city in the nation. And as the city grows and evolves, so do our inhabitants. But the one thing that we must keep in mind as we move forward is that the value of a city is really measured not only by the new things that we bring to our city, but the things that we decide to keep. I believe that Henry B. Gonzalez, as everybody here shares, I know this thought, was a very special man, a visionary, somebody that deserves to be treasured forever, whose memory deserves to be treasured forever. I hope I did this mural justice. This is the first time I see it also, so I'm excited to see it, and I cannot wait for it. So I don't know if I'm out of time. Is this okay? I know I had 4 minutes, so anyway, I just thank everybody for being here tonight. I'm very overwhelmed by the response, and I just hope that this mural represents his vision, and as we move forward, that we really live up to his expectations, not only as a city, but as a nation. So thank you. I'm humbled today.
Thank you, Annalie. Please don't leave. Stand right here. If I can have Congressman Charlie Gonzalez, Mayor Nirenberg, Councilman Trevino, Anita, Ron Rocha, and Luis Escareño to join us. You want to split up a little bit?
Yeah, we can.
You get closer into that.
How many do we have? 3. Oh, I get near the artist. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thanks
You're
for
the
your
center
kind
of
words.
attention.
Annalie, congratulations on what you've done tonight. I really commemorate one of the greatest leaders we had, not only in the United States, in the world. And he's impacted a lot of us growing up and seeing this. So thank you for doing this. Let's give her a hand again, please, for the work she's done. In the late 1950s, a young Dr. William Elizondo, then president of LULAC, and his girlfriend at the time, now his wife, Maria Oralia Elizondo, campaigned for Henry B. Gonzalez, and one of the first runs for office. Please join me in welcoming from the board of the directors of La Prensa, Texas, Dr. William Elizondo.
Thank you, Mr. Escareño. Congressman Gonzalez, we got the other Congressman Gonzalez here, Mayor Nirenberg, and Roberto Trevino, our city councilman, and distinguished guests. It's a real pleasure to be here, and especially on such an auspicious occasion as we have here today. We're making history while we're sitting here. You may not realize it, but you're a part of history today, and part of the history that belongs here in San Antonio. We're in the heart of San Antonio, and you have to be congratulated just for being here and being a part of this beautiful, beautiful occasion. And as I see the mural, it just excites me, because I can remember the the days that we met Henry Gonzalez, which is a long time ago, back in the 50s, to be honest with you. My dad had a grocery store on Ogalito Street in the south side, and he and some other grocers got together, and they wanted to campaign and help Henry B. in his first office, of statewide office, which is a senator, the Senate at the time. And so we got involved in helping him and talking to some of the other grocers and people in the community. And it was a very inspiring kind of thing at the time. I didn't realize it, how important it really was. I just thought it was just another thing rather than going to school. And but that was the first time. But I'm going to tell you a little story that's actually a true story that happened to Henry B. and his campaign back in the early 1950s. He had run for city council, and the opponent that he had at the time, as some of his other friends was Jose Olivares and Rabbi and Reinaldo La Garza, and a few other persons that I can recall, but too numerous. Most of them I don't know who I'm talking about, but I remember them so vividly because they were part of the Good Government League at the time. So at any rate, it happened that they were asking some of the other fellows, "Hey, how am I doing on the election?" He was running against Henry B. And so he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's in the bag." So he went campaigned and continued on, and came back and asked these same fellows, "Hey, how am I doing? What's it look like out there? What does it seem like?" He said, "Oh, fine." He said, "It's in the bag. Don't worry about it." So he said, "Fine." The vote came out, and some of you may know the story. And what happened is that Henry B. won that race. And so he went back to his same fellow and said, "Hey, I thought you said it was in the bag." He says, "Yeah, we didn't tell you. It was Henry B. Gonzalez was in the bag." The actual true story. But at any rate, after 1956, 1958, he ran for governor at the time, and then later on in 1960, he ran again for the state senate. Of course, in 1956, as you may or may not know, there were three other persons that were running that we were supporting, and we didn't have anybody in office in the county, and Albert Pena was running for county commissioner, Albert Trevino was running as justice of the peace, and Henry B. Gonzalez. So those were three people that we were supporting at the time. And young Charlie Gonzalez, our congressman, was much younger at the time. I don't know what he was doing, but he was a young teenager at the time. I'm sure he was out there helping his dad. But anyway, we helped those folks, and all three of them got elected, fortunately. That's the first time that a state senator had won from as a state senator, and came from Bexar County. It was Henry Gonzalez. And then he ran again in 1960 when we helped him. But at that time, in 1959, I had just graduated and set up my practice, and I wanted to find an office downtown, and I went to look at the different buildings around town, and most of them cost a lot of money because I didn't have any money. I had paid for all my schooling and still broke at the time, and went to find a place where I could set up an office, and the only place I could find and did find was the Houston building. A lot of you don't know who the Houston building is, but the Houston building, Charlie knows because he was there and he came up as a young man, and that's when I met him and the rest of the family. And the rent at that time is $30 a month. So I said, "Gee, I can afford that." And so that's why. So I was up on the fifth floor. I was right there, right next to Henry Gonzalez, and saw him all the time as he was state senator, and he got the chance to be able to meet him and talk to him on a continuous occasion. And Luis Tamez, his sister, was the secretary and the one that took all the calls and so on. And she had a notebook that she had right there, and every telephone call, every person that walked in the office, it was written down there, and it was continuous. It was pages and pages of people that came in and telephone calls and so on. And Henry B. would come in and he'd look it over and be able to make some telephone calls. He'd make some telephone calls right away, and he called his constituents or sent out letters immediately. And as far as I know, there wasn't a letter that was sent to him that he didn't respond to and send a letter out to. And I received many of those letters because at that time it was letter writing. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have phones. If you made a telephone call at the time, it cost you $3 at the time, which is about like $30 or $40 now for 3 minutes. And so you spent 3 cents on a postage stamp to send a letter to Congressman Gonzalez up in Washington, D.C. I went to see him if you were able to do so. But that was then. So I was fortunate to get elected in 1961 as president of LULAC. At that time, we had to pay to be able to vote. Most of you know it's a poll tax. I had to pay $1.75. So as a LULAC president, we went out and enlisted people to be sure, and they were registered to vote, to pay their $1.75. At that time, young people working even at jockeys and places like that, they were only making $15, $18 a week. And $1.75 was a lot of money for a lot of folks, and they just couldn't afford it. And many times we'd have to help them to buy a poll tax to be able to vote. So we had, we knew the election was coming up because he had run in 1961 for the U.S. Senate and didn't quite make it, but he received many, many votes in Bexar County. And at any rate, later in November the 4th, 1961, was the election, and of course, at that time, in 1960, we had been very active in the Viva Kennedy clubs, and so part of the Viva Kennedy clubs and to get Henry B. elected was all part of the whole process, and along with a few other people. John Alligance, we finally obtained a state representative that could be a part of our community. And we were able to, fortunate enough to get him and a few other people elected. And we needed representation because we didn't have any. But at any rate, so Henry B. Was able to secure the help of JFK and the entourage from JFK, and sent down the vice president, Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson was a president, and came down, and we had a big entourage at Centennials on the west side, on West Common Street. Many of you and your families kind of remember that or know that, but some of those of you that have a lot of gray hair, you remember some of those things. And my wife, at the time she was my girlfriend, it was mentioned a little while ago, and she's here tonight somewhere. But I told her one morning, I said, "See, I was president of LULAC and single. I said, I'm going to go down to Casablanca to have some coffee with some friends." And I said, "I'd like for you to go with me." She said, "Okay." I think it was a Saturday morning. And she reminded me today was coming down here. I didn't realize that she was going to tell me that, but I recalled that. And I said, "We're going to see some of the fellows down there. So we're going to meet some of the rest of the LULAC persons. We're going to go out and block walk that day." So we had about 40 or 50 people out there block walking, because at that time, we didn't have what we have now. Now you have lists of people. The people actually are registered to vote. You go out there and you select those people. Just go to those homes, and you may be only seeing 1 or 2 families out of 1 or 2 blocks, and that's the only ones that are registered to vote. At that time, we were going house to house and continue on to make sure that we covered the whole waterfront. Anyway, that was fortunate that we had a great success in the fact that we finally had a congressman from Bexar County, the first one from the state of Texas, and who of course became a legend, as all of you know. And we're very proud of the fact that we were able to be a part of that, because later on we were trying to get him involved. When I was on the hospital district board, I was now the Board of Trustees of the United Health System, but back then it had a different name, and I was on the Board of Trustees at the time. And we tried to get him to come in and talk to us in 1964, and I was having a hard time for the people who were making the decisions for us to bring in Congressman Gonzalez, a respected leader at the time. But at any rate, those are some of the fights that we had to implement in order to get a lot of things done that were so much easier now and so much better as we have it there, because But as you know, Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez was able to go and be a part of the New Frontier, and later on the Great Society. New Frontier was JFK's activity as far as the country was concerned, and the New Frontier and the Great Society was Lyndon Johnson's, and he was part of it, and that's when we got all of the acts, different things that we now have, we take for granted, the housing, the library, the different things that we can do now, people that can be represented all over the city and all over the county. So we're mighty happy to be able to have that, and we have people like our Commissioner Calvert and so on, knew his father very well, and it's just a delight just to see the kind of representation that we have now and the kind of activity that we continue to have. So those are some of the, and the other thing I remember also is in 1963 and 64, the Congressman went down to Wilson County. He was the main speaker and introduced my father-in-law. At that time, I didn't realize that my father-in-law was being honored by LULAC at the time, and Congressman Gonzalez was part of it. But the other big thing that a lot of people don't know, and that relates me very closely to Henry B., that we had in common, and I don't know if Charlie knows this or not, but is that we both married two young ladies from Wilson County, from Floresville, Texas, and I'm very happy that we both did so. At this time, it's a real pleasure to just reflect on some of these things that we recollect, that we can think about. We're honoring a great person that is just one of the finest and greatest and most educated and in San Antonio, a person that needs really no introduction, because everybody in San Antonio, when you talk about persons in the community, Henry B. Gonzalez's name comes up. So it was an honor to have been a part of it and part of the family. I feel as if it's part of the family because I used to see all of the family there. And Charlie Gonzalez, of course, about 14 or 15 at the time, more or less. And then later on, when I was president of the San Antonio School District, we were able to send some mariachis down there we sent him out on May the 5th. His birthday, I think, was May the 3rd, I believe, wasn't it? I think that's correct. I think yours is May the 5th, though, Congressman, isn't it? Is that about right? Right, so it's correct. I thought that was correct. It's pretty close. But anyway, thank you so much. It's a real delight to be here and part of this program. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Elizondo. Actually, I met Dr. Elizondo just this last session at Senator Menendez's office, and he told me some of his story, and I appreciate Dr. Elizondo. One of the, not only San Antonio's brightest rising stars, but Texas's rising stars, with deep roots in history in east side of San Antonio. And I look forward to telling the story to Dr. Elizondo in a couple of years, when he has his mural here pretty soon, is now the Bexar County Commissioner of Precinct 4. And he happens to be the first African-American elected Bexar County Commissioner in 170 years of history. Please welcome my friend, Bexar County Commissioner of Precinct 4, Tommy Calvert.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you very much. And thank all of you for being here. My heart was very touched when I saw the mural to the Gonzalez family. I felt a sense of the struggle that your father went through. Your father obviously was a trailblazer, and being a trailblazer means that you do things where you are marginalized, where you are ostracized. And it's not an easy place to be. Opening up in areas that were segregated, pools, integrating swimming pools. I mean, the universe's justice was when he was able to serve on council, able to integrate the city pools and parks that he once had to get out of because he was Hispanic. So, as I reflect upon this incredible art piece, I think all of us need to take the torch of Henry B. And we all need to challenge ourselves to ask, are we truly walking in the footsteps of Henry B? It's not enough just to have an art piece. This man did not struggle to integrate. He didn't struggle to increase affordable housing just for us to forget those who still need it. Are you walking with me on this? So when you convene in the convention center, perhaps you might convene with people who are homeless, who are struggling to make ends meet, who are struggling to make down payments, who are struggling to get access to credit and capital. You know, I have many stories with Henry B. I'll just tell you two quick ones. My mother, I didn't remember this story, but when I was terrible 2 years old, my mother first introduced me to Henry B. And I grabbed his nose and I said, "My, what a big nose you have." My mother almost died. She was completely embarrassed. He was very sweet about it, Dr. Ricardo. He was very kind. He obviously just laughed it off. And then I remember, because I often say I didn't have much of a childhood, my dad took me to Washington, D.C. to visit with the National People's Action Organization. We were about 2,000 people strong. We traveled to Washington, D.C., and I'll never forget, my father always gave Henry B. credit for creating the Community Reinvestment Act. Now, y'all don't know what that's done for us. But the Community Reinvestment Act, Henry B. and my father worked on that in 1978. And that is what told banks that you can no longer redline Hispanic and black communities. What is redlining? Redlining, the redlining is the reason that the west, south, and east sides are as behind as they are today, because people couldn't get loans for a home. Business owners couldn't get credit from a bank. And the Community Reinvestment Act said, if our people are going to give money to your bank, you're going to reinvest in our communities. Henry B. was a part of that. So we have a lot. We have an awful lot of work to do. I remember being up in Washington, in Capitol Hill, and the Congressman welcoming me and the folks that we were traveling with from cities all across the country. His wit was respected, and we need a little bit of that strength. I honor his gentility, but I also honor the fact that he may have punched a man at Earl Abel's because he called him a commie. That's all right. We're past the statute of limitations, I think. But we all should strive to live, to be people who, when you just say their first name, you know who they are. When you say Henry B., you know who we're talking about, right? You know, like Madonna, you know who we're talking about. Henry B. We all called him Henry B. because he was our friend. He was our champion. He had been tested. He had worked in the vineyards for a long time for us. So I'm proud to carry on his legacy in the fight for affordable housing. And while he may not have worn it on his sleeve, maybe Charlie could tell us more about it. I think it's not only because he had the connection to the people, writing those letters, hearing their concerns, being in the streets, fighting on their behalf, representing them in so many ways. But there's something that probably is speaking even to his faith tradition, that he remembered that Mary and Joseph, when Jesus was born, were homeless. They were searching for some place at the inn. So may all of us have some place at the inn for somebody who needs it. Long live Henry B.
Thank you, Commissioner Calvert. Commissioner Calvert, thank you for being here. And I hope you excuse me for not being able to be at your event earlier. I was a little busy tonight, but I'm sure you're going to have more and you're going to see me there. Now I would like to invite Dr. Ricardo Romo, Dr. Maggie Rivas-Rodriguez, and former Congressman Charlie Gonzalez to join us on the stage to reflect a little bit on the life and legacy of Henry B. Gonzalez.
We called it the middle seat not the hot seat. First of all, let me welcome everybody here. On behalf of La Prensa, I'm a proud member of the editorial board, and what they've done today is truly amazing. In the spirit of full disclosure, I met your dad in 1958 when I was a teeny little boy. My father was a precinct chairman of Prospect Hill, and we passed out flyers that said, Gonzalez for governor. So I didn't vote for him, I was too young, but I was there, and it was from that point on, it was a moment of many times of admiration. So I'm going to ask Maggie Rivas-Rodriguez, a professor who came the furthest, she came from Austin for this event, to start our conversation and exploring a little bit about your dad and some things that haven't been discussed today, but certainly people are kind of curious about.
So thank you so much for having me today. My parents, I grew up in Devine, Texas, and we read about Henry B. Gonzalez in the newspaper just about every day. My parents were huge fans of Henry B.'s, and they were always, and they especially loved that he punched out the guy at the Earl labels. They thought that was wonderful. But I think that he was a complex character, and he was very much a product of his time, right? Because he was the World War II generation. And that generation of Mexican Americans had a different take on our place, Mexican Americans' place. And so I noticed on here it says, I am an American without prefix, suffix, apology, or any kind of modification. And I believe that means he did not want to be called a Mexican American, he only wanted to be called an American. I think part of this is the context of the times, and I think it's really important for us to understand that this was not something that was just Henry B. Gonzalez. This was a lot of people of that generation, because there were forces happening in society, and this would have been in the 1960s, 1970s. Can you kind of give us an idea of what that context would have been and what you recall of how he felt about this?
You know, first of all, I think you're absolutely right. Dad thought of himself as just a very basic, simple man, and he was probably the most complex, simple man you could ever meet, because there was so much going on in his mind. But you know, he really was a product of a family that fled Mexico with the intention of going back, but he was born here. And when that school teacher told him that he was an American, and he went back home and told everybody at the dinner table that, you know, I'm an American. And you may have heard the story, and I'll just tell it real quick. And so they said, his cousins from Mexico were visiting and said, no, you're not, you're a Mexican. And of course, his parents, intending to go back to Mexico, didn't protest. And so my dad said, no. You know, Miss Nelson, or whatever the name of the teacher was, she said, I was born here, I am an American. And they all started laughing. And that's when a nanny that they had, that was part of the family for many years, she said, that's ridiculous. Are you telling me that if a cat is born in an oven, it's bred? And so Dad always, but he really understood about being an American, and it was about inclusion. And you're absolutely right. He was so proud of the history and the culture, because I mean, gosh, if anyone, the beauty of his Spanish and in the literature that he had read was astounding. People thought he had a heck of a vocabulary in English. If you ever spoke to him in Spanish, he was an incredible speaker and student of all of the history and such. Yet he understood that for whatever reason, they were not being included in whatever this American dream was all about. I think that was it. And then, of course, with World War II, I think you're absolutely right, Maggie. And by the way, she is an absolute expert about the Hispanic contribution made during World War II. I think when they came back, when everybody came back, Dad had two brothers that served active duty and such. I think they came back empowered. They had sacrificed. They were treated pretty much as equal when it came to combat, right? And I think my father, though he had never experienced that himself, was still a product of that generation. And I think they were not going to put up with anything less than equality. And that's what he meant. A lot of people misunderstood it, you know, that he wasn't proud of his heritage, that he wasn't a Mexican American, or we went through so many, it was American with Spanish surname, American Mexican descent. We went all, I mean, we still haven't decided if it's Latino or Hispanic, we have that. But that was Dad, and I think you're absolutely right. I think that World War II experience and that generation came back ready.
Let me follow up with a little bit different path. So you were around your dad a lot. Did you get a sense, and I'm really exploring the joys and the disappointments, the conflicts, and maybe the I should have. So he lived through some very difficult times, assassinations, war, impeachment. Which one do you think is the most difficult of times that really just tore at him?
Well, I do think when he went to the state senate, which was an incredible moment for the community and such, because it should have been impossible for him to have gotten elected to the state senate, but he did. And he really was the first Mexican American. I think Jose Navarro had been appointed
100 years ago.
But Dad really was the first popularly elected state senator, I mean, which is incredible. But when he got there, look, segregation and discrimination was institutionalized in this state. And I think that was an incredible experience for him. And it was frustrating to be such a minority, a lone voice. Of course, he had Chick Kaysen from Laredo as his ally and such. And I think that was his proudest moment, fighting all the segregation bills and all that. But also I think it caused him great heartburn and distress to know how much progress lay ahead, that it was really going to be an uphill battle. I mean, they were passing pieces of legislation that perpetuated, in essence, what the Civil War tried to put an end to. And you know, Mexican Americans were included in those minorities. So I think that was really the real time for that. Dad's political character was really born and shaped, and he went on, and he was always thinking of a better tomorrow, but that it was one step at a time. And he even realized that in his lifetime, he would never get to that destination.
Okay.
I would imagine, because I don't know that they would have very many flights between San Antonio and Washington. I imagine that there was a lot of family separation. How did your family deal with that? And what were some of the costs? Because I think that there is essentially, when someone is in public office, there's a personal cost, a family cost. So it's not just the person who's sitting in a desk in Washington D.C., but it's people, the family back home.
And whenever someone is wanting to enter politics, and it might mean, and it's one thing to go to Austin, it's another thing to go to Washington. The first thing I tell them is, the first casualty of a political life is your family. And anyone that tells you anything differently is not telling you the truth. Even up in Washington, when there's freshman orientation, they'll say, oh, please understand, we're setting the schedule with your families in mind. No, they're not. Believe me, they're not. And so with Dad, I think, there were 8 of us, and I was the lucky one. I think the luckier 4 were the ones that saw Dad up until the time that he left in 1961, because he was gone. I mean, he flew up to Washington for the week and flew back. The most incredible thing in those days is that it came out of his pocket. It wasn't part of the budget, which is incredible, because, I mean, we weren't comfortable by any measure, but he was not going to be part of Washington. He never was. 37 years, 2 apartments. Never bought a piece of property there. He never became part of the Washington scene. I'm not saying that's good or bad or whatever. That wasn't Dad's lifestyle. But that's the way I think he salvaged the family life. And for my 4 younger brothers and sisters, that's the only time they would have seen him. Because by the time he left to Washington, I was already in high school. And so, if Dad was around or not, in high school, you don't really notice that much. But the others were all so young. And it is a sacrifice. And that's why I always think, like, when I think Dad was so appreciative of Mom for doing what she did, because you need a partner, a spouse that is going to put up with not just your absence, but a whole lot of abuse. And you have to be really thick-skinned. And to my younger brothers and sisters that didn't have the benefit of the 4 older ones, to have seen Dad at home, at meals, taking us camping. I was the right age. That's why I got to go to Austin with him all the time. I was just blessed because I had greater exposure to Dad than all my other siblings. But the 4 younger ones, and Mom, I think it was just an incredible sacrifice. And my hat's off to, Joaquin and everybody else with a young family who's basically mimicking my father's lifestyle. It's tough. It is really tough. But, there are people like my mother, and I'm sure there are husbands of women that aspire to public office that will support them, and it is needed, truly is, but it's a sacrifice.
So over time, we two very tough topics, and one of them is Vietnam and what LBJ accomplished, and then his legacy is always yes, but Vietnam. What was your dad's, I've not read much about this. How did your dad view Vietnam early on, and did he ever have any second thoughts about Vietnam?
Well, and I know that Professor Henry Flores is in the audience, and I think he's doing some research on Dad for a book, and that is an area to really be explored, because Lyndon Johnson obviously really believed the generals. Dad had serious doubts and such. But I still remember the discussions with Dad saying that he really, really felt if there was any one huge issue where maybe he could have been a little different in some of the votes, it would have been Vietnam. It destroyed LBJ and all the incredible work. But for Vietnam, which is major, of course, Lyndon Johnson would probably be the greatest president that ever occupied the White House. With the Great Society, Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, Medicare, all of it, incredible, just absolutely incredible. But Dad really always anguished over Vietnam, just the number of young people we lost just from San Antonio. I think Edgewood must have lost 55 of their graduates.
The school district. Yeah.
Edgewood High School.
And then the high school, 34.
It was tough.
So what do you think people don't understand about your dad that maybe this is a time to kind of set it straight?
He just had this internal compass about right or wrong, justice and injustice. And he wasn't too crazy about having a needle somewhere in the middle, And so people would say that he was intractable, unreasonable and such. No, he just really believed you had to go all out in order to achieve that kind of balance and justice and such, and that there's sometimes you couldn't compromise, you don't compromise principle. Dad was a good negotiator, and don't get me wrong, and he was a good chairman of the banking committee because he gave everybody a voice, Republicans or Democrats, but he had a direction. And I think Commissioner Calvert alluded to the National Affordable Housing Act, the Cranston-Gonzalez bill, which was incredible. The Community Reinvestment Act, which imposed all sorts of conditions on banks to go to underserved communities. A lot of people just thought that was really arbitrary, putting all these conditions. It wasn't respecting market forces. Dad believed that market forces sometimes led you to very discriminatory behavior, and that's why he fought so hard. He just believed so strongly about things. And I know that people, and there were some folks that, when I went to Washington, they would say, gee, you'll meet with us? Your dad wouldn't even meet with us. And I'd go, well, I'll tell you why, I'd say, but I'll listen to you. And then they would leave and they go, but you're going to vote just like your dad. And I said, yeah, but I was a judge and I'm used to listening. Come on in. And that was it. But no, Dad really felt strongly. And once he took a stand, it was real tough, but I will tell you this. He took that stand after he really researched things, and he figured the best way of getting from A to B usually was a straight line, you know. I think that was misinterpreted about Dad. I mean, you know, yes, he did punch somebody at Earl Abel's, which was really bad.
I don't know.
No, I mean, it was kind of hard, right? Because I was a county court of law judge, and those were the kind of cases that we handled. And so everybody was asking me if I was going to try my father's case, you know. And then I thought to myself, that would be fun, you know. But it did not work out that way.
Let me move on to banking. So he was on the banking committee, and in the late 80s, every bank got wiped out with the exception of Frost Bank. And I talked to Tom Frost about this. He said it was the most horrible time of his entire career. Now, what is your sense? What were the lessons? Did your dad apply some good lessons to what happened with the savings and loans and the banks and so forth for future? And what were those lessons?
Well, that was the amazing thing about my father, because people would say, you know, the guy's crazy. That, you know, this is good policy, and he would warn people about unnecessary risk. And no one would listen. And Dad always had, one of his favorite sayings, Maggie, was that the future will be my vindication, when people thought, man, what are you talking about? But if you ever read his speeches on the floor or in committee, he basically was telling you that we were heading to a meltdown. And he was right on the savings and loan debacle. He was right about risky bank practices because it was obvious to him. He was really a brilliant man, and I know that it was already alluded to that he did not have an expertise in finance. What would this San Antonio guy know about Wall Street? Well, what they didn't bargain for is that he was a quick study and a thorough study, and he listened to the experts on this. They didn't bargain for that. But no, I tell you, Ricardo, I think when it's all said and done, people will look back and they'll say, you know, your dad warned us about that. And that's what I would have some of his colleagues would come up to me and they'd say, hey, you know, your dad told us if we voted for that thing, this was going to happen, and we just didn't believe it.
Okay.
I've got to go back to the Mexican American Chicano movement, because you mentioned that he, you know, from the House floor. So I know that he was very, very worried about MALDEF, about the Ford Foundation's support of MALDEF, and it was a major news story, but also was a major development within MALDEF, that it ended up because of his criticism of the Ford Foundation's funding of MALDEF and Southwest, and what was then the Southwest voter registration, became Southwest voter registration. That made some changes in how the Ford Foundation funded things. I'm wondering how that kind of fit into his worldview, because what it seems like what he was seeing was, and I think this is partly, you know, I teach journalism and I'm a former journalist. The news media was writing a lot of very heated stories about the Chicano movement. Yeah. And a lot of people were very worried about what the Chicano movement was doing. How does this fit into his worldview? And do you think that he ever altered his understanding or his opinion about what was going on?
You know, I don't think they ever did. And to those that were around at that time, again, I mean, Dad was not a flawless man and everything else, and he could be stubborn. But he really believed that there was a way of going about to exact change. His fear was, and you can have this debate, and it should be a good debate, that whether it was La Raza Unida and the Chicano movement, and some of the rhetoric was really destructive. And I know maybe it was not meant, but you go around saying, kill the gringo, some people might get a little excited about that. So Dad thought that it really wasn't moving us forward. You got to remember, the mantra of, you know, you don't achieve equality by separating yourself. And I think he viewed the movement as almost a separatist movement. And that was it. It was really that simple. Was there politics involved in such? Well, yeah, you know, I mean, you have followers, you have individuals that support you and such, and all that played into it and all. But deep down, I think he just had a fundamental difference of how they were going about, and really believed that they were setting some progress back and playing into the hands that would love to keep you separated, never to include you. And that's why I've always quoted that. I said, you know, how do you achieve equality by being on the outside?
And
it doesn't make sense.
I think that's kind of the larger issue, is change from within or change from without. Like, what is going to be the most effective way of creating equality? Is it from people outside trying to criticize the mainstream, the structure?
Well, you know, that's what's strange, Maggie, because I know that part of Dad believed in the disruptors. You know, part of it. And because he was that at one point in his career, right? Just by running against the establishment, he was a disruptor and such. Right. And he was real concerned about the rhetoric and all those things. But deep down, he knew that it was a long game. You know, a step forward, one step at a time, then all of a sudden 10 steps, but never go backwards. And I think that's what he was concerned about. I do believe that deep down, as much as Dad, he was flamboyant and fiery and all those things, that lasting change was evolutionary and not necessarily revolutionary. And history sort of bears out a lot of that, where you do have revolution, for instance, and then all of a sudden those that lead a revolution aren't really prepared to govern. I mean, that just goes over and over in history. And I think Dad really understood. We will be part of the government, we will be part of the society, we'll be part of business. We are going to be agents of change, and some of it will not be as fast, but it will be permanent. And I think he's actually was right. I mean, it's hard, and when you're younger, patience is tough. And I mean, you want change tomorrow, and that's a very difficult thing to achieve. And is it going to be lasting? I think that was Dad's philosophy.
So some folks in Washington, and maybe his friends, refer to him as Don Quixote. And you may have heard that. What in particular do you think that he went after that were the windmills? And I'm thinking, was it the assassination committee that he was on and then quit, or other things?
Well, he tilted at so many windmills. A lot of them were individuals, either in office or in the bureaucracy or heading a department, a secretary of housing or a secretary of transportation or the head of the FAA. I still remember those fights. Lord, was it the Attorney General of Texas at the time? I can't remember. It was Will Wilson. But they all would depict Dad as Don Quixote. But I still remember the one where it was Will Wilson, but I can't remember his position. This was in the Senate days. And Gene Rodriguez is here, he probably could tell me, but I still remember the cartoon, and they kept saying, why is Henry B. Gonzalez going after this guy? The governor and everybody else, they're not going to do anything to this guy. Well, finally, Dad succeeded in causing everybody so much heartburn that the person was relieved of the position or whatever it is. And there was a cartoon, and it's Dad, it's Don Quixote, and there's a windmill that's fallen over, and it says Will Wilson on it. So, I mean, so he could be successful. But he had fights with the FAA. Well, God, his name was, I can't remember his name. What was it? Halaby. God, that was, I mean, those things got personal, you know, because that's the nature of a lot of these things. As far as, I think Dad's tilting at windmills were over specific issues that were dear to San Antonio or to Mexican Americans. But there were also projects that, he was very ambitious. I was talking to somebody from Corpus Christi. I mean, Dad had his way. We'd have a channel that would have been dug between Corpus and San Antonio. We'd have actually a port. I mean, Dad had these ideas, and they were grandiose at times, and that, in a way, that was Don Quixote. But when it came to dreams and visions and everything else, I'll show a good example of Tilton at Windmills. When they were going to build the new BAMC, Dad was insisting on 450 bed capacity. Senator Graham wanted 250 or 200, and they went at it. I mean, to the end, where they weren't even speaking the rest of their careers. But Dad had a lot of support in San Antonio, generals in the military, the city council, commissioner's court, and we got that 400-plus bed hospital. There's no way they should have gotten it, but they got it, which formed the basis years later for us to get how many billions invested. And now we are the center of military medicine. That was Dad. I mean, he was always thinking ahead. Hemisphere wasn't just about a World's Fair. It was about transforming this part of the city, increasing our facilities, and getting some attention here and an investment. So all of those things, that was Don Quixote in a way, but Don Quixote wins the battle at the end of the day.
Yeah. Maggie?
So you went to Congress. What lessons from your father served you when you went to Congress?
Respect all your colleagues. No matter, they all got there. It wasn't easy. You may disagree with them. Different parties, different philosophies, race, gender, everything. Respect them and learn a little bit about their districts. And then you'll understand where they're coming from. And a lot of it, I mean, when I say Dad's biggest lesson to me was you need to really listen, because if you ever talk to Dad, you thought he wasn't listening that much because he was talking a lot. But that was, I think, the biggest thing. And just to be open, give everyone a fair chance to be heard. You can't make everyone happy, but they deserve to be heard. And that went to constituents too.
I'm going to tell you a story. I was interviewing Hector de Leon, who's an insurance attorney in Austin, and he has a huge photograph of your father on his wall. And he told me this story. When your father was in the Texas Senate, he and his brother would deliver newspapers to his office. And Henry B. took an interest in him and asked him a bunch of questions, was always asking him, inquiring. Later on, when he grew up, he ended up going to law school, he got married, and his wife died young. And your dad went to the funeral.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something this is somebody that he really didn't know that well, but he had a loyalty to this kid. He was a kid at the time, and he will never forget that. He will be forever.
Well,
and I think that's true for a lot of people. I think there's a lot of loyal Henry B. Fans that he's done small things for, but to them it's a huge thing.
I have people, there's not a week that goes by, and I always tell staff this, my staff as well as Dad's staff, and some are here today, from way back to the 60s all the way to the time I served. Dad really cared about them. People didn't understand when he asked you about your aunt, he really wanted to know about your aunt. He just wasn't making conversation. 20 years later, if you ran into Tommy and you had talked about your Aunt Cecilia 20 years earlier, he'd go, Tommy, how's your Aunt Cecilia? I mean, real quick, because these things are like incredible. I got an email at the law office I'm at now, and this woman just said, I knew your dad because we always flew on the same flight, and we just talked. And he would ask me about my kids, and I would tell him. And then I quit that job, and then one day, I'm at the airport again, and I hear, Marilyn! And I turn around, and it was your father. And he came up, and I hadn't seen him in years. And he started asking me, and actually, asked about my kids by their names. And it was an incredible, he had a gift. And I keep telling people, part of the gift was the basis for remembering the names is he really was interested. I mean, he just would take an interest. And we could just get story after story. I mean, there's some just incredible ones. Unfortunately, you know, I didn't have that gift of seeing a face and remembering it. So when I was running for office and someone would say, well, we're with you because we were with your father, and I'd say, oh, well, what's your name again? And they'd look at me and they'd shake their head and they'd go, your father never had to write it down. So there was a price.
I do remember, so when I was off in college in the 60s, I would come home to San Antonio to party on the weekends. And one weekend, I actually went to 3 parties. It was a wedding, a going away party, and a quinceañera. He was at all 3. And I brought this up to my government professor when he was talking about how do we impact government, how we do this. But what was really amazing is I thought he was signing autographs. So I kind of edged over there, and somebody was telling him, I got cheated on my housing, and he would, tell me the name of the, where do you live? He was writing down everything that people were presenting, problems. Yeah. But it was like, we're out there partying, and he's like, I'm not sure your dad had any hobbies, but there he was working over the weekends. And then I guess Sunday he'd go back, Sunday, Monday, go back. But I think that's the mark of what you were talking about. Somebody who listens, somebody who cares, somebody who wants to make a difference, somebody who is convinced that they do have a gift and they're going to use that gift to help other people. So I think, appreciate everybody being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Dr. Romo, Dr. Maggie Rivas-Rodriguez, and Congressman Charlie Gonzalez, thank you for sharing your stories. That concludes our evening, but I want to thank our sponsors who are listed on our message board. You'll see in your program in the back, Ramon Bosques and Narciso Cano, Dr. Silvia Villarreal, Senator Jose Menendez, Representative Diego Bernal, Congressman Joaquin Castro, Henry Cisneros, and little Henry Gonzalez, C. Leroy Cavazos Reina. Thank you for your sponsorship. I'd like to especially acknowledge the City of San Antonio, the Bexar County Sheriff's Office, Leonard Rodriguez, the Westside Development Corporation, La Prensa, Texas, the Westside San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, LULAC Orgullo de San Antonio Chapter. But lastly, if I can have your attention, please. Henry, thank you for joining us. Lastly, I'd like to thank somebody that put us together tonight, and without him, it probably wouldn't have happened. Luis Carreño. Thank you, Louis, for having us and putting this together. Please enjoy the reception hosted by Huerta Duty Free and AT&T with music from Janitzo. Enjoy, and thank you for being here.